Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is a very special one because I will be releasing my Fantasy Caro Kann Masterclass. So this video is the first one of a 5-video series, and in this video I will be giving a general overview of the Fantasy Caro Kann. I will also be talking about each individual variation and just giving a general overview of the main ideas and what to look out for. It's also worth mentioning that in the subsequent videos, I will be going much more into depth of each individual variation, and there will also be a PGN file linked in the description completely free of charge. So without further ado, let's begin with the Fantasy Caro Kann Masterclass. Okay, so the Caro Kann begins with e4, c6, d4, d5, and here I recommend the move pawn to f3. Okay, so before I get into the individual variations, I would like to quickly talk about the move pawn to f3. So just visually, we are solidifying our center. This is a huge plus of the fantasy, but the cons, the disadvantages of the fantasy are that we do not now have the natural square f3, we cannot naturally develop our knight to f3, and more importantly, we have severely weakened this diagonal. This is a huge minus of the fantasy. So already we have a bit of an imbalance. Okay, and just in general, the reason why I think the fantasy is such a good option from the white pieces is that, first of all, if I'm not mistaken, it is the 5th most common move. It's quite an uncommon move from the white side, right? So this basically means that you will be much more familiar in playing these positions than your opponent. So this already gives you a huge edge. The second big advantage of the Fantasy Caro Kann is that the Caro Kann is a slow and positional opening. If black plays the Caro Kann, they want a slow game. They do not want a strategic, dynamic game. This is not something they're looking for. And by playing the move pawn to f3, we turn it into something energetic. And there is in fact only one way for black to maintain a slow game, but this has its drawbacks, as I will get into. So let's begin with the most common move from the black side, and that would be the move pawn to e6. This is the only way in which black can maintain a slow game. So against e6, we simply play knight to c3, and here black has two options, either knight to f6 or bishop to b4. If black plays knight to f6, we simply play e5. We kick the knight back, f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and this is a French defense. This is not something a Caro Kann player wants. If a Caro player wanted a French, they would play a French, right? This is not something they'll be familiar with, right? Alternatively, if black decides to go for the move bishop to b4, well, this now resembles a win our French. Here we simply play bishop to d2, this is the move I recommend, and after something like knight e7, we play a3, if bishop takes c3, we take back, we have the bishop pair, we're very happy. And if bishop to a5, well, here I simply recommend we play bishop to d3, and very important in this position, pawn to f4. Why? So we can simply put our knight to f3 and castle short. So in general, the move pawn to e6 leads to slow and positional games. It leads to a French defense at the end of the day, but this is not something a Caro Kann player really wants, in my opinion. A Caro Kann player wants a Caro, doesn't want a French. So the second most common move from the black side is the move d takes e4. And against this move, we simply take back. This actually now justifies us playing pawn to f3, right? We still maintain a strong center. And in this position, black only has one move to maintain any sort of equality. And that is the move pawn to e5. If black plays something like knight to f6, which is a very common move at the lower level, we simply play e5, knight d5, c4, we kick the knight back to b6, knight c3, knight f3, and we have everything. We have a huge center, we have both knights beautifully developed. As you can see from these arrows, we're about to play bishop to d3, castle short, and very important in the fantasy variation, we have the open f-file. This is a huge plus of the fantasy. Very often we will have the open f-file. So like I mentioned, the only move in this position to maintain equality is the move e5. And here we need to be very careful, because by playing e5, black has now opened up this diagonal, and in the fantasy you always need to be careful of this diagonal. I will mention this at least 100 times in the masterclass. If white plays a move like d takes e5, black will not trade queens, black will play queen h4, and either we move our king, or we play g3, queen takes e4, the rook is lost, and the game is lost. Okay, so be very, very careful. For this reason, the correct move in this position is the move knight to f3, controlling the critical h4 square. And in this position, black has three options. Two of these three options are very fun. One of these options is a little bit boring, and we will maintain a stable advantage. So let's begin with the most common move, which is bishop to g4. Here we simply play bishop to c4, and we really play for the f7 pawn, or the f7 square, right? We're looking maybe for c3, queen b3, right? Putting more pressure on this pawn, maybe even double attacking. We're looking for some knight g5, knight f7. We're looking for short castles, right? So our rook can get involved. So after the move bishop to c4, black has one and only one move, and that is the move knight d7, okay? If black plays something like knight to f6, we have already won the game. Bishop takes f7, dynamite, king takes f7, knight e5, the king goes to g8, for example. We take back the bishop, we're going to be up 2 pawns, the king will be terrible, we're going to castle, we have the f-file, this is completely winning. So like I mentioned, the only move which black has is the move knight d7, and here I recommend the move castles. Once again, black has an only move, and that is the move knight gf6. If black plays something like bishop e7, you already know the drill. Bishop takes f7, dynamite, king f7, knight takes e5, double check. We're going to win the bishop and we're going to win the game. So black plays knight gf6. Here I recommend the move pawn to c3 to just solidify our center. And after something like bishop to d6, I recommend the move bishop to g5. Okay, our main ideas in this position are queen to b3, right? Double attacking the b7 and f7 pawn. We have the open f-file, we have a big center, we maintain a stable advantage. Objectively, the position here is equal, the computer gives equal, but in my opinion, white is the one for choice. Okay, so another option which black has is to play e takes d4. This is also a very, very fun variation. This is known as the Maroczy gambit after the move bishop to c4, which is the move that we will play. Very important, we do not want to play a move like queen takes d4, right? Because a queen trade is not in the spirit of the fantasy variation. We are looking for strategic positions. We're looking for dynamic, fun positions. A queen trade is not something we're really looking for, right? It's not in the spirit of the opening. So for this reason, we play the move bishop to c4. And here black needs to be very, very careful. If black plays something careless like bishop g4, you already know the drill. Bishop takes f7, king takes f7, knight e5. This is a fork. We're going to win the game. If black plays a move like bishop to c5, we will simply castle, not fearing the move pawn to d3, which is a discovery. And after something like knight f6, we play the move knight to g5. And if black decides to castle, we have an absolute dynamite of a move, bishop takes f7. And after rook f7, knight f7, king f7, you really now see the power of the fantasy variation, pawn to e5. This is the power of the open f-file. In fact, we don't even have to play e5 winning the knight, we can also play the move queen h5 check, forking the king and the bishop, which is perhaps even a bit better. Similarly, if black decides to go for bishop e7, it's the exact same drill. We castle, knight f6, knight g5, short castles. You already know the drill. Bishop takes f7 check, rook f7, knight f7, king f7, pawn to e5. We are completely winning. The third move black can play is the move bishop to e6. Now this move is very, very uncommon, but unfortunately it does kind of kill our play. Why? Because we can no longer attack the f7 pawn, we can no longer put our bishop on c4, right? This bishop now controls the c4 square. So against the move bishop to e6, I simply recommend to go c3 to just build up a bit of a strong center. After something like knight d7, bishop to d3, we're going to castle short, we're going to have the open f-file, maybe we'll play for something like knight bd2, knight b3, and we're just going to maintain a stable advantage. The third option which black has is to play the move pawn to g6. Now, I have to cover this in my masterclass. It's not a very common move. It's not a bad move. It's just not played very often. And against g6, I recommend to play this as you would against Piet's defense. So very often this includes putting the knight on c3, putting the bishop on e3, queen to d2, long castle. If black castles short and puts the knight on f6, we play bishop h6, h4, h5, black will play b5, b4, and it will be a race. There will be cases where black will be first and black will play b5 before we have the chance to trade off the bishop on h6. And if black is first to the punch, I recommend to castle short and just say, you played a bad move like b5. This creates, for example, a weakness on c6. And then I would play this in a bit more of a positional manner. So after g6, like I mentioned, I recommend the move knight c3, bishop g7, bishop to e3, right? All standard. Now, black can play something like queen to b6, and here I would recommend the move queen d2, simply sacrificing the pawn, rook to b1, queen a3. Now we also have the b file, and here I recommend bishop d3, f4, so we can put the knight on f3, short castle, and we expand on the king side. If black doesn't go for this poisoned pawn variation, quote unquote, and plays something like d takes e4, well, we simply take back, right? This now justifies playing the move pawn to f3. Right now we still maintain a big center, and after something like knight to f6, we play knight to f3, and we simply maintain a stable advantage. Both of our knights are beautifully developed. We have a nice center. We have our bishop on e3. We can play the move h3 if we want to prevent knight g4, but in general we're looking for queen d2, bishop h6, long castle, bishop e2, bishop c4, one of the two options, and we play h4, h5. And like I mentioned before, if black plays b5 before we have the chance to play h4, h5, then I would castle kingside and play this in a bit more of a positional manner. So let's have a quick look. If black castles short, here I would recommend the move queen to d2. A move like knight g4 is never really dangerous. Here we can simply play bishop to g5. If h6, we stay on this diagonal. And black actually needs to be very careful with this knight because we are already threatening something like e5 followed by h3, looking to trap this knight. Like I mentioned previously, black can play a move like b5. And in this instance, I would not recommend to castle simply because black is faster than we are. So here I would basically just say, we are better. This pawn on c6 is a backwards pawn. This is a very bad pawn. I'm looking to play something like a4, bishop e2, maybe e5 at some point to blunt this bishop, and castle short. And then really just play against this weak c6 pawn. This is how I would play this position. Okay, and the final move which black has to their disposal is the move queen to b6. And against queen b6, you need to know exactly what you are doing. This is a very dangerous and sharp line. If you do not know what you're doing with the white pieces, you will be losing in less than 5 moves, I promise you. Okay, and funnily enough, the move queen to b6 is actually the reason why so many people do not play the fantasy. They fear this move so much. But if you know what to do, there's nothing to fear. So what's the idea behind queen b6? The idea is to really just control this diagonal. Black is looking to play e5, crash open the center, play something like bishop c5, and really just press on this diagonal. Okay, so how can this look like? We play the move knight c3. There black goes with e5. We take that pawn, not fearing bishop c5. And here we simply need to remember the move knight to a4. Okay, black is threatening the knight on g1. Black is threatening bishop f2. Check. We cannot prevent both threats. But knight a4 forks these two pieces. And if black plays, for example, bishop to f2 check, we play king e2. We do not play king d2 and hang checkmate in 1. Okay. We play king e2. The only way now for the black queen to maintain contact with the bishop is to play queen d4. Here we simply take the queen on d4, bishop takes d4, and in this position I recommend the move pawn to f4. Black will now most likely take the pawn on e4, and we get this specific structure. This is very, very important. I will really delve into this pawn structure, talk about how to play against this pawn structure, and really just talk about how to win this pawn. Because truthfully, if you win this pawn, you're going to be a pawn up, you're going to have a huge center, you're going to be playing for a win more likely than not. Alternatively, if black decides to play something like queen a5 check, right? Black is then maybe saying, oh look, this is a fork, I'm forking the knight and the king. We do not simply play the move knight c3, right? This loses to d4. Here we play the move c3. And the best black has here is to play bishop takes g1, rook takes g1, d takes e4. Here we play the move f4. Very, very important. Keeping this pawn. And once again, we have this specific pawn structure. Okay, so that concludes the first episode of my Fantasy Caro Kann masterclass. Like I mentioned, this video was just about giving a brief introduction of the fantasy and really just giving a brief overview of each individual variation. In the subsequent videos, I will make sure to go much more into detail. The PGN files will most certainly be linked in the description. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching and see you guys next time.